to a maximum of 10 minutes. We'll do our best to accommodate you. Don't feel like you have to take a full 10 minutes, but we'll try to do that. And I'd like to ask any member who has family with him to introduce that family. Dr. Crichton, we're delighted to have you here. Thank you for your appearance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the important subject of politicization of...
Aren't you going to introduce Sherry?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'm going to pay for that. This is my wife, Sherry Alexander, behind me. Oh, my God. Sorry, honey. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the important subject of politicization of research. In that regard, what I'd like to emphasize to the committee today is the importance of independent verification to science. In essence, science is nothing more than a method of inquiry. The method says an assertion is valid and merits universal acceptance only if it can be independently verified. The impersonal rigor of the method means it is utterly apolitical. A truth in science is verifiable whether you're black or white, male or female, old or young. It's verifiable whether you like the results of a study or whether you don't. Thus, when adhered to, the scientific method can transcend politics. And the converse may also be true. When politics takes precedent over content, it is often because the primacy of independent verification has been overwhelmed by competing interests. Verification may take several forms. I come from medicine, where the gold standard is a randomized double-blind study, which has been the paradigm of medical research since the 1940s. In that vein, let me tell you a story. It's 1991. I'm flying home from Germany, sitting next to a man who's almost in tears. He's so upset. He's a physician involved in an FDA study of a new drug. It's a double-blind study involving 4 separate teams. One plans the study, and another administers the drug to patients, a third assesses the effect on patients, and a fourth analyzes the results. The teams do not know each other and are prohibited from personal contact of any sort on peril of contaminating the results. This man has been sitting in the Frankfurt airport innocently chatting with another man when they discover to their mutual horror they are on 2 different teams studying the same drug. They are required to report their encounter to the FDA, and my companion is now waiting to see if the FDA would declare their multi-year, multi-million-dollar study invalid because of this chance contact. For a person with a medical background accustomed to this degree of rigor in research, the protocols of climate science appear considerably more relaxed. In climate science, it's permissible for raw data to be touched or modified by many hands. Gaps in temperature and proxy records are filled in. Suspect values are deleted because a scientist deems them erroneous. A researcher may elect to use parts of existing records, ignoring other parts. But the fact that the data has been modified in so many ways inevitably raises the question of whether the results of a given study are wholly or partially caused by the modifications themselves. In saying this, I am not casting aspersions on the motives or fair-mindedness of climate scientists. Rather, what is at issue is whether the methodology of climate science is sufficiently rigorous to yield a reliable result. At the very least, we should want the reassurance of an independent verification by another lab, in which they would make their own decisions about how to handle the data and yet arrive at a similar result. Because the fact is that any study where a single team plans the research, carries it out, supervises the analysis, and writes their own final report carries a very high risk of undetected bias. That risk, for example, would automatically preclude the validity of the results of a similarly structured study that tested the efficacy of a drug. No one would believe it. By the same token, any verification of the study by investigators with whom the researcher had a professional relationship, people with whom, for example, he had published papers in the past, would not be accepted. That's peer review by pals, and it's unavoidably biased. Yet these issues are central to the now familiar story of the hockey stick graph and the debate surrounding it. To summarize it briefly, in 1998-99, the American climate researcher Michael Mann and his co-workers published an estimate of global temperatures from the year 1000 to 1980 that appeared to show a spike in recent temperatures that was unprecedented in the last 1,000 years. His alarming report formed the centerpiece of the UN's third assessment report in 2001. Man's work was criticized from the start, but the real fireworks began when two Canadian researchers, McIntyre and McKittrick, attempted to replicate Mann's study. They found grave errors in the work, which they detailed in 2003. Calculation errors, data used twice, data filled in, and a computer program that generated a hockey stick out of any data fed to it, even random data. Mann's work has since been dismissed by scientists around the world who subscribe to global warming. Why did the UN accept Mann's report so uncritically? Why didn't they catch the errors? Because the IPCC doesn't do independent verification. And perhaps also because Mann himself was in charge of that section of the report that included his own work. The hockey stick controversy drags on, but I would direct the committee's attention to three aspects of this story. First, 6 years passed between Mann's publication and the first detailed account of errors in his work. This is simply too long for policymakers to wait for validated results. Second, the flaws in Mann's work were not caught by climate scientists, but rather by outsiders, in this case, an economist and mathematician. They had to go to great lengths to obtain their data from Mann's team, which obstructed them at every turn. When the Canadians sought help from the NSF, which was the funding agency, they were told that Mann was under no obligation to provide his data to other researchers for independent verification. Third, this kind of stonewalling is not unique. The Canadians are now attempting to replicate other climate studies and are getting the same runaround from other researchers. One prominent scientist told them, "Why should I make the data available to you when your aim is to try and find something wrong with it?" Even further, some scientists complain the task of archiving is so time-consuming as to prevent them from getting any work done. But this is nonsense. Today, we can burn a data to a CD or post it in an FTP site for downloading. Archiving data is so easy, it should have become standard practice a decade ago. Government grants should require a replication package as part of funding. Posting the package online should be a prerequisite to journal publication. And there's really no reason to exclude anyone from reviewing the data. Of course, replication takes time. Policymakers need sound answers to the questions they ask. A faster way to get them might be to give research grants for important projects to 3 independent teams simultaneously. A provision of the grant would be that at the end of the study period, all 3 papers would be published together, with each group commenting on the findings of the others. I guarantee this would be the fastest way to get verified answers to important questions. But if independent verification is the heart of science, what should policymakers do with research that is unverifiable? For example, the UN Third Assessment Report defines general circulation climate models as unverifiable. If that's true, are their predictions of any use to policymakers? I would argue they're not. Senator Boxer says that we need science fact, and I completely agree. But the unavoidable truth is that a prediction is never a fact. And if policymakers decide to weight their decisions in favor of verified research, that will provoke an effort by climate scientists to demonstrate their concerns using objectively verifiable data. I think we will all be better for it. In closing, I want to state emphatically that nothing in my remarks should be taken to imply that we can ignore our environment or that we should not take climate change seriously. On the contrary, we must dramatically improve our record on environmental management. That's why a focused effort on climate science aimed at securing a sound, independently verified series of answers to policy questions is so important now. And I would remind the committee that in the end, it is the proper function of government to set standards for the integrity of information it uses to make policy. Those who argue that government should refrain from mandating quality standards for scientific research, and that includes some professional organizations, are merely self-serving. In an information society, public safety depends on the integrity of public information, and only government can perform that task. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Crichton, for an excellent statement. Dr. Benedict?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And without